It is my favourite time of the season. The Championship playoffs are now among us. Let's talk about them. Guys, welcome back to another video on the channel. I really want to get your guys' input onto this one in the comments down below. Now, I am on holiday for next week, so I'm not going to be able to do a preview for both first and second legs. Instead, we're going to do a big preview in today's video for both of the playoff semi-finals. And I want to know from you guys in the comments down below, who do you see making it through each legs? Because I think we've got two quite evenly matched ties here. I quite like it that it's been pitted as Nottingham Forest up against Sheffield United and Luton up against Huddersfield. I think these two really could be two fantastic ties. Of course, we've got the first action going on tomorrow at Kenilworth Road for Luton up against Huddersfield. Then on the Saturday, we got Sheffield United against Forest before we wrap things up on the Monday with Huddersfield against Luton, and then on the Tuesday for Forest up against Sheffield United. I want to get your guys' predictions for both legs in the comments down below. I want to know who you think is making it into the final. So we'll start out with a preview for Luton up against Huddersfield. Third going up against sixth as our first playoff semi-final. Got this one kicking off at 7:45 on Friday. And like I say, two quite evenly matched sides actually. It is Huddersfield who probably come into this tie as the favourites for a number of factors. Obviously, they finished higher in the league. If we look at the head-to-head records between these two sides this season, there was a goalless draw which was played out at Kenilworth Road earlier on in the season, and then later on in the season at Huddersfield, it was Town who took all 3 points with a 2-0 win in that game. But quite a bit of drama from that game, if I remember rightly. We had the Adebayo penalty miss, which only adds more drama between these two sides, and tactically I think this is a really interesting battle between, probably for me, two of the best managers in the Championship this season, Carlos Corberán and Nathan Jones, particularly for what they've got out of each of their squads. Pound for pound, the fact that these two are even in the conversation for the playoffs this season, I think is absolutely fantastic. If you went back and watched my managerial ranking video for the season, I put both of these two managers in my top 3 for the season because I really think they've done and worked absolute wonders throughout the year. In terms of goal scoring threats, both teams are set up fairly similarly actually. They've both averaged around about 1.4 goals per game this season. The major disadvantage, or I suppose major unknown for Luton coming into this game, is the fitness of Elijah Adebayo. He did go ahead and miss Luton's final 2 Championship matches of the season due to a hamstring injury, but a recent report suggests that maybe he could be back within the frame, but we don't really know if these reports have any truth to them, if it's just Luton putting out a bit of messaging to maybe startle Huddersfield a bit. But reportedly so, he's been doing some extreme cold cryo chamber treatment to go ahead and try his best to get back to fitness for that Friday fixture. Now, even if that was to be the case, Luton probably aren't getting a fully fit and firing Adebayo, which is already an advantage in Huddersfield's favour. Adebayo has been hands down Luton's biggest goal threat throughout this season. He is their top scorer. And I think in the couple of the games that he has missed for Luton, they've certainly lacked that impetus going forward. Obviously, against Fulham, they weren't really in that game as the home side put 7 goals past them. And even against Reading, weren't at their fully firing best. Obviously, it was a mistake from the Reading goalkeeper, which allowed Harry Cornick to get in and score. So Adebayo's fitness, I think, will be absolutely pivotal to this tie in either swinging it in Luton or Huddersfield's favour. When it comes to the defensive records between the two sides, they are fairly similar throughout the season. Luton have conceded 55 this season compared to Huddersfield's 47, but those numbers have been somewhat skewed by that ridiculous game Fulham had when they put 7 goals past Luton, because prior to that moment the records were fairly similar between the two sides. But Luton obviously have had to have another reshuffle with injuries that have happened in their defensive department, and they had to go ahead and complete that emergency loan of Matt Ingram coming in. And the other thing that Huddersfield really have in their advantage coming into this playoff tie, not just against Luton, but in the grand scheme of going on to win the whole thing, is their history in the playoffs, and I do think that that counts for something. And we've seen the manner in which Huddersfield have dug in the past to get through playoff campaigns. Their promotion from League One back in 2012, that goalless draw against Sheffield United in the final, which we could see a repeat of this year, ending up going to penalties, Huddersfield having the bottle to go through. Exactly the same against Reading in the playoff final, as they were promoted in 2017. They actually got through that entire playoff campaign without scoring a goal themselves, obviously. obviously. It was a 1-1 draw against Sheffield Wednesday in the second leg, but Tom Lees put that ball into the back of his own net. A goalless draw in the final, and then they once again went on to win in penalties. So I don't know, I just think some clubs have that knack for playoff competitions, and Huddersfield are certainly one of those teams given their recent history, which I do think plays into the narrative somewhat. So it's hard to make a prediction on this one because, you know, we don't have all the knowledge of how the fitness will be for some of Luton's key players. If I had to call it right now, I'm going to say the first leg at Kenilworth Road is going to end as a goalless draw. I think that Huddersfield will be quite happy to take that back with them to their ground. Now, as we've seen so far this season, Huddersfield can be quite good at nullifying opponents. And then in the reverse fixture at Huddersfield, I just think the home side may nick it in that one. I'll go for a sort of 1-0 Huddersfield. I do see this tie between these two being a fairly low scoring one, but that could all blow back up in my face. And out of the two teams right now, I think my gut feeling is saying that Huddersfield just about get through this tie, but I'd be interested to know which way you guys are leaning for this semi-final. And then we have the second semi-final to preview between Sheffield United and Nottingham Forest, another really evenly poised semi-final, which I'm particularly struggling to call this game, to be honest. I wouldn't go against backing it either way, to be honest. I think it very much depends on the personnel that turns up on the night and the fitness of a few key players as well. In terms of the head-to-heads between these two sides this season, it is completely level. Both home and away, these two sides played out 2 1-1 draws this season, and in those games, quite a bit of drama, to be honest. In the first meeting between the sides at the City Ground, it was Morgan Gibbs-White giving Sheffield United the late lead before Lewis Grabban levelled up in the 83rd minute, and there was even more late drama in the game at Bramall Lane. Billy Sharp giving Sheffield United the lead before Ryan Yates came up with a 95th minute equaliser. I'm really struggling to call this one. The first game is obviously at Bramall Lane, so Sheffield United will look to assert their dominance on that tie straight away. And you probably would give Sheffield United the edge in their home fixture. Their home form has obviously been absolutely impeccable, particularly since Paul Heckingbottom has arrived. And there are maybe a few question marks just over how Forest ended the season. Obviously, they've been on this miraculous run under Steve Cooper, averaging over 2 points per game. But where will this Forest squad be psychologically after that Bournemouth defeat? I'm not so sure. Obviously, the first half of that Bournemouth game was very tight with an instant match reaction to it, but in the second half could never really get on top, and Bournemouth in the end I think were deserved winners from that one. I don't think we can read all too much into Forest's final day performance because Steve Cooper made a bunch of changes for that one, and the personnel for Forest will also be a really fascinating one because one player who could absolutely make all the difference is Keinan Davis, and as of recording right now, we're none the wiser in terms of his fitness for this fixture. And for me personally, don't get me wrong, Sam Surridge I think has done a terrific job in Keinan Davis' absence. I think he's a brilliant finisher. I think that's been evident in the matches that he's played, but Forest with Davis up front, I just think are a completely different animal. I think that not just what he gives them in terms of some of the goals that he's scored, but his all-round play has been something that I've really been taken back and surprised by so far this season, because when he first arrived at Forest, and from what I'd seen of him at Villa previously, I've got to admit that I always saw him as a little bit one-dimensional, to be honest, but that's completely not been the case at Nottingham Forest. And I think that Steve Cooper has really brought that form out of him, but at this point in time, you know, he's missed the last few game weeks of the season. It's unclear on his fitness status, similar to Adebayo at Luton. And a striker like that who will come up with a moment can absolutely make all the difference for Nottingham Forest. When it comes to Sheffield United, they know all too well about strikers being out injured. That's been something that has completely plagued them in the second half of the season, but they've managed to get through all right, and I think that Heckingbottom has struck the balance quite well actually. It's interesting how similar these two sides actually go ahead and set up. It's no surprise probably that we've seen them both play out 2 1-1 draws. Obviously both have an emphasis on the fullbacks and wingbacks even getting forward. With Sheffield United, with Zinkernagel in the hole, Brennan Johnson running past him, that right side for Forest especially is such a threat with Brennan Johnson and Jed Spence, and then either Surridge or Davis depending on the fitness of the later. And then for Sheffield United, they've managed to do fairly well in the absence of the likes of, you know, Brewster, Sharp, McBurney, McGoldrick. But the one player who I think all Blades fans will be pinning their hopes on is completely Morgan Gibbs-White. And there's so many interesting matchups throughout the pitch for this one. But the battle between Brennan Johnson and Morgan Gibbs-White will be absolutely fascinating, because regardless of either team turning up on the day, the overall performance levels, those two players right there are match winners. And we've seen both of them countless times throughout the season coming up with big moments, really out of nothing as well. And that's why I think this game's so hard to call, because there's so many different match winners in both squads, particularly those forwards that we've just mentioned there, that it's hard to put your finger on. I think this is going to be such a tightly contested one over both legs. I don't think that either side is particularly going to want to go ahead and give away a lot. I think that Forest will be reluctant to go all guns blazing in the first leg. We've seen Steve Cooper set up quite conservatively away from home at times. Probably played against them in some instances, you know, that Bournemouth one for example. I think for that first semi-final at Bramall Lane with the crowd on side, I think Sheffield United may just edge that first game by 1 goal, maybe sneak a 1-0 or something like that, and then obviously Forest will go back to the City Ground with it all to play for then. And back at the City Ground once again in front of a packed out stadium, I could easily see Nottingham Forest turning it around. Obviously Sheffield United have been a little bit unreliable themselves on the road this season, so I do think that it's important for Sheffield United to get off to the best start possible in that first leg. For me, I think it comes down completely to the fitness of Keenan Davis. I think a player like that can completely swing it in Forest's favour in the second leg if they are after a couple of goals, but if he's not, I think Sheffield United could hang on, you know, maybe a draw in that reverse fixture at the City Ground. I think 1 goal separates these two sides between both legs, and it could go either way. I'm not averse to predicting either one to win, but I don't think this will be a landslide victory for either team. I think there's too much on the line, and both teams are too resilient defensively for that to go ahead and happen. But over the 2 legs, given who's fit right now, I think Sheffield United may just edge this one, you know. I think the Blades players have known for quite some time that it would be the playoffs for them this season. They've been focused on that. Whereas Forest had that outside chance of automatic promotion maybe. And obviously it just didn't quite happen for them in that Bournemouth game. So I think Sheffield United may sneak it over the 2 legs by 1 goal, but I'm not very confident in predicting that. I'm so 50-50 on this tie. There we have it though, guys. Really tough predictions to make. From my predictions personally, from right now, I think we may get a playoff final between Huddersfield and Sheffield United, which would be a really interesting repeat of that League One playoff final from all those years ago. I'm certainly not ruling out Forest and Luton though, and I wouldn't be surprised whatsoever to see those two sides in the final. But that is where my head is currently at between all of these playoff contenders. I want to get your guys' thoughts in the comments down below. Who is making it through the playoff semi-finals? Let me know down below. If you did go on to enjoy, make sure to leave a like and make sure to stick around and subscribe for some regular Championship content. Apart from that, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.